A Summer of Reluctance. The summer air hung heavy over the Texas horizon, whispering secrets of change and mystery long before anyone arrived at the old ranch. Imagine, if you will, a restless soul, Lena, whose heart raced not just from the mundane hustle of packing, but from an unspoken promise of an adventure that was anything but ordinary. As her parents' voices echoed downstairs, hurrying her along with a mix of exasperation and excitement, Lena could only think, why can't we be heading to a tropical paradise instead of this dusty relic? Her mind, however, was already brimming with more than mere teenage rebellion. It was a cauldron of longing, fear, and the thrill of the unknown. The car ride was more than just a journey from one place to another. It was a passage into a realm where the familiar blurred into the enigmatic. The bumpy road snaked through the vast Texas countryside, each turn revealing a canvas of rugged landscapes and ancient trees that seemed to guard untold secrets. Lena's headphones, blasting her favorite tunes, were her only shield against the monotony of the drive. Yet beneath the upbeat music, her thoughts churned with a quiet discontent, a feeling that something within the very air around her was charged with a mysterious energy, an energy that hinted at a destiny far beyond the confines of a simple summer vacation. Upon arriving at her uncle's ranch, a sprawling, weathered estate that had witnessed countless generations, the sense of nostalgia was palpable. The building stood as a relic of childhood, its walls echoing memories of laughter, love, and long-forgotten dreams. But today, as Lena stepped out of the car, a wave of unease washed over her. There was an inexplicable tension, a whisper of isolation that crept into her heart. It was as if the ranch itself harbored secrets too heavy to be carried by the wind. Her uncle greeted her with a warmth that belied the underlying strangeness of the place, remarking on how much she had grown, while Lena could only muster a half-hearted smile, masking her inner turmoil. Inside, the house was a paradox of comfort and confinement. Familiar yet unwelcoming, the rooms bore the marks of a once lively home, now subdued by an almost eerie stillness. As Lena settled into a room that was both a sanctuary and a prison, she couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched, of being tethered to a fate that was slowly, inexorably unfolding. Every creak of the wooden floor and every distant sound outside her window sent ripples through her already agitated mind. It was a place where time seemed to slow down, where every second was laden with the weight of impending change. In that moment of quiet introspection, Lena's thoughts became a battleground for conflicting emotions. She yearned for the freedom of her past, a life filled with laughter, wild adventures with friends, and the promise of tomorrow without chains. Yet, here she was, surrounded by familiar faces and places that no longer offered solace, but only a haunting reminder of the isolation she felt. The ranch, with all its rustic charm, had become an arena where her inner demons danced in the shadows, and the silence was punctuated by her racing heartbeat. Then, as twilight began to weave its dark magic over the landscape, a subtle, almost imperceptible sound pierced the heavy air. It was the snap of a twig, soft yet foreboding, that resonated deep within her soul. For a fleeting moment, time halted. Lena's eyes widened as a shiver of anticipation and dread ran through her body. What if that sound was not merely the wind? What if it was the harbinger of something, someone, lurking just beyond the periphery of her vision? In that suspended breath, the ordinary dissolved into a tableau of surreal possibility. As night deepened, the ranch transformed under the silver glow of the moon. Shadows lengthened and merged, crafting shapes that hinted at both beauty and terror. Lena lay awake in her bed, her mind adrift in a sea of uncertainties. Every rustle outside, every whisper carried by the wind, became a note in the symphony of the unknown. It was in these silent, solitary moments that her inner voice grew louder, a voice filled with both defiance and despair, urging her to break free, to unravel the mysteries that tethered her to this fated place. The stage was set for an extraordinary summer, one that promised not only the heartache of isolation and the pain of internal struggle, but also the tantalizing allure of the supernatural. Amid the vast, starlit expanse of Texas, Lena would soon confront a destiny intertwined with secrets and shadows, where every heartbeat echoed with the promise of transformation, and every moment was a prelude to a climactic revelation. In that quiet, electrifying pause between what was and what could be, Lena realized that her journey was far from over. It was just beginning, a journey marked by the collision of fate and free will, where the call of the unknown would soon compel her to face the ultimate truth of her existence. And as the night deepened, so did her resolve, a resolve to seek, to understand, and ultimately, to embrace the mysterious forces that promised to reshape her world forever. Bumpy roads and bleary eyes. The journey continued along a rugged stretch of Texas highway, where the horizon was a never-ending tapestry of dusty plains, ancient oak trees, and distant hills that seemed to whisper the secrets of a bygone era. Lena sat in the back seat of the aging sedan, her eyes half closed, and her mind caught between humorous irritation and a subtle, growing sense of foreboding. Every bump in the road jolted her awake, forcing a reluctant smile as she mumbled sarcastic remarks under her breath. "Seriously, Mom, couldn't you have picked a smoother ride?" she quipped, her tone a mix of exasperation and wry amusement. Her brother Kelvin, ever the dramatist, threw his arms up in exaggerated disbelief at every jolt, declaring, "Oh, dear sister, you're practically riding a bucking bronco out here." His theatrical flair managed to coax a brief laugh from Lena, momentarily easing the tension of the long, monotonous drive. The car's worn speakers blared her favorite tunes, a familiar escape that drowned out the relentless hum of the engine, and the occasional clatter of gravel against the tires. Yet, beneath the catchy melody, there was an undercurrent of static interference each time Lena checked her phone for a sign of cell service. With a resigned sigh, she admitted to herself that the lack of connectivity might not just be a temporary inconvenience. It could be a sign of something far more mysterious brewing on the outskirts of civilization. As the vehicle chugged along, the Texas countryside rolled by in a blur of sun-bleached colors and rugged textures. Fields of wildflowers and scrub brush merged with patches of barren land, creating an ever-shifting landscape that was at once breathtaking and eerily desolate. The roadside was dotted with relics of small-town America, a weathered gas station, a faded billboard advertising long-forgotten brands, and scattered clusters of homes that seemed to huddle together against the vast emptiness. Through the front windshield, the imposing silhouette of the ranch gradually emerged, rising like a sentinel against the sprawling plains. Its old, sprawling structure, built of weathered stone and time-worn wood, exuded an aura of both nostalgia and an inexplicable forewarning. There was a sense that this place, with its deep history and lingering echoes of laughter and sorrow, was not merely a destination, but a crucible where past and present would collide in unexpected ways. Inside the car, Lena's thoughts drifted, between the mundane and the mysterious. Every turn of the road seemed to carry with it a hint of the extraordinary, a glint of something unusual shimmering on the horizon, quickly swallowed by the endless blue sky. At times, the wind would pick up, its persistent whistle weaving through the cracked windows as if it were trying to tell her something. Yet, in the midst of these small, enigmatic details, the car's interior felt like a cocoon of routine. Kelvin's incessant banter about the dramatic landscapes outside, the rhythmic beat of her music, and the occasional shared smirk as they acknowledged the absurdity of their situation. Lena glanced over at Kelvin again, catching him tapping his fingers impatiently on the dashboard. "Are we ever going to get any cell service?" she asked, half in jest, half in genuine concern. Kelvin's eyes sparkled with mischief as he replied, "Maybe not. But who needs a phone when you've got a front-row seat to the grand show of Texas?" His words, though playful, carried an edge of truth. Out here, in the midst of rugged isolation, it felt as if every moment was infused with the potential for something spectacular. or terrifying, to unfold. The landscape grew more rugged and untamed as the car approached a bend that offered an unobstructed view of the ranch. The estate loomed large, its silhouette outlined by the soft, fading light of the afternoon. There was an undeniable majesty in its decay. A grand structure that had seen better days, now wrapped in the embrace of nature's relentless reclaiming force. The sight stirred a mixture of awe and melancholy in Lena. It reminded her of a childhood spent in carefree wonder, yet also hinted at the inevitable passage of time and the secrets that lay hidden behind those ancient walls. As the car rolled onward, the interplay of light and shadow on the dusty road set the stage for the next chapter of their journey. Every bump, every sudden jolt, seemed to punctuate the silent promise of change. Lena's mind, still half asleep from the constant motion, couldn't shake the feeling that their destination was more than just a simple vacation spot. It was a gateway to something deeply transformative, a turning point that would redefine everything she thought she knew about her world. In that quiet, reflective moment, as the ranch drew nearer, Lena felt a shiver of anticipation ripple through her. The road ahead was bumpy and uncertain, yet undeniably charged with a raw energy that beckoned her to confront the mysteries waiting in the shadows. And while her eyes grew bleary from the long ride, her heart was wide awake, eager to unravel the secrets of this strange, enchanted land. Homecoming to the ranch. As the car pulled to a stop before the sprawling ranch, Lena's heart stirred with a confusing blend of nostalgia and trepidation. The ranch, a relic of her childhood, loomed before her with a grandeur that once promised endless summer adventures. Now, however, its weathered facade carried a certain heaviness, a silent testament to years past and memories altered by the weight of responsibility and routine. Stepping out of the car, Lena hesitated for a moment on the gravel driveway, taking in the sight of the old stone building bathed in the soft glow of the late afternoon sun. The familiar outlines of sprawling porches, sagging roof lines, and faded paint evoked a bittersweet nostalgia. This was the place where she had once run carefree through sunlit fields, but now it seemed tainted by an underlying sense of boredom and a gnawing desire to escape. Her uncle, a warm yet somewhat reserved figure, was waiting by the door. With a broad smile that seemed to mask a lifetime of unspoken worries, he stepped forward and enveloped her in a hearty embrace. "Lena, it's so good to see you again," he said, his voice a comforting blend of familial warmth and gentle authority. Yet as he complimented her on how much she'd grown, Lena couldn't help but feel that the reunion, though warm, was laced with awkward formality. There was an unspoken tension in the air, a reminder that this homecoming was not simply a return to joyful memories, but rather a step back into a world of obligations and expectations she'd long tried to avoid. Inside the ranch, the air was thick with the scent of aged wood and a hint of fresh hay. Lena's eyes wandered around the foyer, taking in every detail with a mix of admiration and discontent. Old photographs, faded and slightly askew, lined the walls. Silent storytellers of a past that now seemed distant and almost foreign. Her uncle's careful but traditional decor clashed sharply with her own taste, as she recalled the many times she had insisted on a more modern, vibrant atmosphere. "You remember how we used to complain about these dull curtains?" Lena quipped, half smiling as she recalled the countless debates over the color schemes of the rooms. Her uncle chuckled, a sound that was both familiar and bittersweet. "Well, you always did love your pink. I suppose some things never change," he replied with a knowing glimmer in his eye. His response, light-hearted, yet laced with the weight of tradition, underscored the subtle conflict between Lena's youthful desire for something fresh and the slow, unyielding passage of time that had kept this place exactly as it was. As they toured the ranch, Lena's mixed emotions grew more pronounced. The sprawling fields, once full of promise and adventure, now felt confining, a reminder of the isolation she'd long dreaded. The animals, ranging from stubborn mules to a few spirited cattle, roamed freely in pens that seemed too small to contain their wild nature. Each animal, each creak of the old barn door, echoed a story of a simpler time, yet also hinted at the inevitable clashes between freedom and confinement that were to come. The rooms themselves, though rich in memories, were cramped and in need of an update. The faded wallpaper, creaking floors, and the constant lack of cell service, a modern inconvenience that felt like an anachronism in the digital age, served as a constant reminder that Lena was not in the world she had once known. Every step she took in the narrow hallways brought back a flood of recollections, the joyful echoes of childhood laughter, the bittersweet moments of parting, and the ever-present weight of family expectations. Despite the warm welcome, Lena couldn't shake a persistent sense of foreboding. The ranch was not simply a homecoming. It was a return to a life that felt increasingly suffocating. Every corner of the house, every familiar object, was imbued with the echoes of the past, a past that was rapidly colliding with the present. The lack of modern connectivity felt symbolic, as if the very world outside was cutting her off from the life she desperately wanted to lead. Her uncle, ever the peacemaker, tried to lighten the mood by steering conversations toward lighter topics, recalling old family vacations, the humorous mishaps of childhood, and the simple joys of ranch life. Yet even as he spoke, Lena's mind wandered to thoughts of escape. She longed for the freedom of distant shores, the promise of vibrant, bustling city life, and the opportunity to reconnect with friends who were just a call away. If only there were any service. In that moment, standing in the familiar, yet transformed, heart of the ranch, Lena felt the pull of two very different worlds. On one side lay the comfort of tradition and the warmth of family, with all its imperfections and unspoken expectations. On the other, the thrilling, uncertain prospect of a life unburdened by the past. The ranch, with its creaking floors and nostalgic charm, was a bittersweet haven, a place where old memories mingled with the fresh, sometimes painful reality of change. As the sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows across the time-worn porches, Lena took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. Here, at the crossroads of her past and her uncertain future, she realized that every step forward would be a journey through layers of memory, conflict, and the inevitable passage of time. And as the day gave way to the approaching night, a lingering question echoed in her mind. Could she ever truly escape the magnetic pull of this home? Or was she destined to be forever intertwined with the legacy of the ranch? New rooms, old grievances, Lena's footsteps echoed softly as she wandered through the familiar corridors of the ranch, finally arriving at the bedroom that once felt like a sanctuary of youth. The room, although updated with fresh paint and modern touches, still held onto an ineffable air of haunting familiarity. The faded floral wallpaper had been replaced by a more contemporary design, yet every corner whispered remnants of long-forgotten secrets and childhood laughter. As she set her suitcase down on the creaking wooden floor, a mixture of relief and melancholy washed over her. A bittersweet acknowledgement that some things, no matter how much they change, never truly leave their past behind. Unpacking her belongings, Lena's eyes wandered over the items that painted the picture of her former life. A well-worn diary, a collection of postcards from friends scattered in a drawer, and a few personal trinkets that still smelled faintly of distant summers. Each object carried with it a story, a memory of freedom and adventure that now seemed almost unreachable. With every item she placed back into the wardrobe, the contrast between her present confinement and the life she once knew grew starker. The room's new bedding, crisp and white, did little to mask the underlying heaviness that pressed on her chest, the oppressive solitude of being severed from the world she longed to be part of. Outside her window, the ranch's vast, open fields stretched out, but there was no sign of the bustling, carefree energy of her friends back home. The familiar hum of conversation and the raucous laughter of summer parties were replaced by an eerie silence, punctuated only by the occasional creak of the old building. Lena's phone, forever stranded in a corner of the room, remained a stubborn relic of a connected past, a lifeline to a world of instant messages, social media updates, and vibrant interactions that now felt like distant echoes. The absence of cell service wasn't just a modern inconvenience. It was a constant reminder of her isolation, a barrier that separated her from the life that pulsed just beyond these ranch walls. In a quiet moment, while she sat cross-legged on the floor surrounded by open boxes and scattered mementos, Lena allowed herself a rare glimpse of vulnerability. She closed her eyes and imagined the summer days of her youth, filled with spontaneous road trips, endless chats over iced drinks, and nights that ended in bursts of laughter shared with friends. The memory was as vivid as it was painful, a glaring contrast to the stifling routine of her current existence. Each memory was a tiny rebellion against the crushing sense of duty that now governed her days, a soft protest against the very idea of being trapped in a place that, though filled with familial love, offered little freedom. Her thoughts drifted to the summer lifestyle she had once known, the excitement of new experiences, the thrill of unexpected adventures, and the liberating feeling of being able to simply be. Now, with every passing minute, she felt the weight of a life paused in time. There was a strange irony in the way her updated room, despite its modern amenities, managed to amplify the feeling of being cut off from the world. It was as if every new detail was a reminder that while the exterior had changed, the heart of her existence remained the same, a constant longing for connection, for the joy of spontaneous encounters, and for the unfiltered essence of life that pulsed in the vibrant rhythm of her old days. Even as she arranged her clothes neatly in the dresser and adjusted a few photographs on the bedside table, Lena couldn't shake the pervasive sense of melancholy. The room was a delicate balancing act, a blend of comfort and confinement. The warm hues of the updated decor clashed subtly with the cool, shadowed memories that lurked behind every familiar piece of furniture. It was here, in this small space, that Lena felt both protected and imprisoned. Each moment of solitude deepened her internal conflict. The yearning for freedom fought against the quiet resignation that had settled over her since leaving behind a life where she felt truly alive. Gentle breeze wafted through the slightly ajar window, stirring the curtains and carrying with it the distant sounds of life beyond the ranch. For a brief moment, Lena allowed herself to dream of reconnecting with the outside world, of reaching out to those she had left behind. But the very thought filled her with an acute sense of loss. Loss not just of vibrant summer days and carefree laughter, but of the unyielding spirit that had once defined her. Here, in the stillness of her reimagined bedroom, she felt the full impact of her isolation, a poignant reminder that even the most modern surroundings could not mend the deep fissures of loneliness. As the day wore on, Lena sat by the window, lost in thought, her eyes scanning the vast open landscape that seemed to stretch into an endless sea of possibility. It was in these quiet, reflective moments that the room's dual nature became most apparent. It was a space of refuge and a cell of solitude, a haven for memories that were both beautiful and bittersweet. The isolation was palpable, a constant undercurrent that would soon foreshadow more dramatic and heart-wrenching events to come. In that silent, solitary hour, Lena resolved to hold on to the fragments of her past, to cherish the memories of her once vibrant life, even as she faced the stark reality of her present. Though the updated room offered no escape from the oppressive disconnect, it also held the promise of new beginnings, a chance to rediscover herself amid the old grievances that still clung to her heart. And so, as the shadows lengthened and the soft murmur of the ranch at dusk began to rise, Lena's mind filled with a quiet determination to find a way to bridge the gap between what was lost and what might still be reclaimed. A brief taste of freedom. In a moment of impulsive defiance, Lena made up her mind. The confines of the old ranch, with its familiar walls and lingering isolation, had grown too suffocating. She craved connection, the buzz of modern life, the comforting glow of a screen, the laughter of friends only a call away. Without a second thought, she slipped out of her room and found herself drawn to the garage, where an old family car waited like a relic of better, freer times. Heart pounding. With a blend of exhilaration and uncertainty, Lena slid into the driver's seat. The worn leather and familiar scent of motor oil sparked memories of impromptu road trips and midnight drives under sprawling skies. She fumbled with the keys, her hands trembling as the ignition roared to life. The engine's rumble was a promise of escape, a break from the monotony that had gripped her every day since arriving at the ranch. As she drove away, the familiar landscape of the ranch melted into the endless, rugged beauty of the Texas countryside. The road ahead was a bumpy ribbon, cutting through fields of parched grass and clusters of wild scrub. Each jolt and vibration was a physical reminder of her newfound freedom, a freedom measured in moments, in the open road, and in the fleeting hope of reconnecting with a world beyond these walls. Lena's headphones cradled her ears as she cranked up the volume on her favorite song. The upbeat rhythm and catchy lyrics were a welcome distraction, transporting her away from the oppressive silence of isolation. Yet, with each passing mile, her phone remained stubbornly lifeless, a silent testament to the persistent lack of cell service in this remote stretch of land. She glanced at the screen with a mixture of frustration and longing. Was this isolation simply a temporary inconvenience? Or did it hint at something more profound and mysterious lurking in the backdrop of the open road? The car's suspension protested with every bump, each jolt sending ripples of anticipation through Lena's body. The road was far from smooth. Its unpredictable curves and potholes created an unsteady dance that both exhilarated and unnerved her. She couldn't help but let out a soft laugh at the absurdity of it all. A grown woman, desperate to reclaim her connection to the world, riding on a bucking, ancient sedan through a landscape that was as harsh as it was beautiful. Just as she began to relax into the rhythmic chaos of the drive, a sound shattered the illusion of control. It was a faint crack, almost imperceptible at first, a twig snapping somewhere off the beaten path. Lena's heart skipped a beat. The sound, though subtle, carried an eerie resonance, as if the very air was whispering warnings in a language older than time. She slowed the car to a cautious crawl, her senses suddenly on high alert. The vast open fields that had seemed benign moments before now appeared cloaked in mystery. The once comforting hum of the engine and the steady beat of her music were replaced by an oppressive silence that pressed in from every side. The snapped twig repeated, this time louder, followed by a deep, animalistic growl that sent shivers racing down her spine. The growl was raw and primal, a sound that did not belong to any creature Lena could readily name. It was as if the wilderness itself had awakened, and something ancient and formidable was stirring within its depths. Lena's hands tightened on the steering wheel as the car came to an uneasy halt along the side of the road. The surrounding darkness, punctuated by sporadic bursts of light from a setting sun, now seemed full of hidden terrors rather than the gentle promise of a summer evening. Her mind raced with questions. What could have produced that chilling sound? Was it merely an animal in distress, or something far more sinister? The juxtaposition of her desperate desire for freedom and the unsettling unknown that lay just beyond the path made her pulse pound even faster. The mysterious auditory clue had cracked the veneer of her escape, shattering the illusion that she was simply fleeing a stifling homecoming. Instead, it hinted at an emerging threat, a supernatural presence that had been lurking on the periphery of her reality, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal itself. Lena took a few deep, steadying breaths, trying to reconcile the thrill of her escape with the mounting fear that crept up her spine. In that moment, as the sky deepened into twilight and shadows grew long across the rugged terrain, Lena realized that her impulsive decision to seek connection had led her into a realm of uncertainty. The open road had become a threshold between the world she knew and a mysterious domain where the ordinary gave way to the extraordinary. Every bump, every creak of the old car now carried a hint of the supernatural, a promise that what lay ahead might forever change her life. With no immediate answers and a growing determination to face whatever came next, Lena restarted the engine and resumed her journey, her eyes fixed on the dark horizon. The unanswered questions about that ominous sound, the snapped twig, the haunting growl, would linger in her mind, casting long shadows over the road ahead. And as she drove on into the encroaching darkness, the sense of foreboding mingled with the hope of freedom, leaving the audience to wonder what truly lurked in the wilderness beyond the familiar. A dark sound in the meadow. The fading light had given way to an eerie twilight as Lena drove down a narrow, unpaved lane that cut through a secluded meadow. Every bump in the road was amplified in the dense silence that had settled over the landscape. Suddenly, an unfamiliar sound, a brittle snap of a twig, pierced the quiet. Lena's heart skipped a beat, and the car shuddered as she slammed on the brakes. In that split second, the world around her seemed to freeze. A deep, resonant growl soon followed, echoing across the meadow like the call of something ancient and unseen. The sound was both chilling and oddly magnetic. A raw, masculine vibration that sent a surge of conflicting emotions racing through her veins. Lena's breath hitched, fear clashing with an inexplicable sense of comfort. It was as if the growl carried a promise, a secret that beckoned her closer, even as it warned of hidden danger. In a flash, the car's tires skidded on the loose gravel, and Lena's body jolted violently as she was thrown forward. Her hand gripped the steering wheel, so tightly her knuckles turned white, and for a moment, the car seemed to teeter on the brink of catastrophe. The sudden chaos left her disoriented, an adrenaline-fueled haze where every sound, every flicker of movement was magnified beyond reason. The growl reverberated again, louder this time, echoing off the distant trees that lined the meadow. It was not a mere animal's call. It was something deeper, resonating from the very core of the wilderness. Lena's eyes darted between the shadowed tree line and the dark road ahead, her pulse pounding in her ears as she tried to decipher the source of the sound. Was it the cry of a wild beast, or a manifestation of something altogether supernatural? In that moment of acute fear, Lena lost control. The car veered off the road and hit a shallow ditch, sending it careening into a tumble. The world spun as she braced herself for impact, and then, with a heart-stopping jolt, everything went dark. When she regained consciousness, she found herself sprawled on the soft, dew-damp grass of the meadow, her body aching from the fall. The engine of the car lay silent a few yards away, a distant, forgotten memory amid the chaos. Lena's eyes, now wide with terror and confusion, searched the encroaching darkness. The deep growl that had haunted her earlier returned, this time sounding as if it was right beside her. It was a low, rhythmic sound, pulsating like the beating of a massive heart, a sound that was at once threatening and, against all instinct, strangely reassuring. Despite the fear that knotted her stomach, there was an odd magnetic pull in its cadence, a hypnotic lure that whispered of hidden depths and forbidden secrets. Her mind raced as she struggled to process the sensation. Part of her screamed to flee, to escape the unseen menace lurking in the shadows. Yet another part of her, one she scarcely recognized, felt an overwhelming need to stay, to listen, to understand. It was a visceral pull, as if that mysterious voice held the key to a destiny far greater than her current confinement. The conflicting emotions battled within her, raw terror at the unknown, an inexplicable attraction to the primal sound, and a desperate longing for connection to something beyond the isolation of the ranch. Lena slowly rose, her limbs trembling as she tried to steady herself on the cool, damp grass. She dared not move too quickly, fearing that any sudden action might provoke the unseen presence. Instead, she listened. Every detail of that resonant growl was etched into her memory, the way it seemed to oscillate between a warning and a welcome, the deep vibrations that stirred the very air around her. It was as if the sound was calling her name, inviting her to cross the threshold between fear and wonder. As she took cautious steps toward the direction of the sound, Lena's thoughts swirled like autumn leaves caught in a gust of wind. She remembered her childhood fantasies of adventures beyond the mundane, of hidden worlds waiting to be discovered in the quiet corners of the earth. Now, in the shadowed expanse of the meadow, those fantasies felt uncomfortably real. The growl, deep and resonant, was no longer just a sound. It was a promise of something profound, a doorway to a secret realm that lay just beyond the veil of the ordinary. Her heart hammered in her chest as she paused near a cluster of ancient oak trees, the growl fading momentarily into a low murmur. In that brief silence, Lena allowed herself a sliver of hope. Perhaps this mysterious voice was not solely a harbinger of doom, but a guide to unlocking the deeper truths of her existence. The very air around her seemed to vibrate with potential, with the promise that, beyond this moment of fear and uncertainty, lay a revelation that could forever change her life. With cautious determination, Lena resolved to follow the sound, her eyes fixed on the dark silhouettes of the trees. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with both peril and possibility. But even as fear tugged at her every nerve, the allure of that deep, enigmatic growl, its hypnotic blend of menace and magnetism, filled her with a faint, stubborn hope. It was a hope that perhaps, in the heart of the unknown, she would find not only answers but a connection to a destiny that had been waiting for her all along. Waking in a nightmare, Lena's eyes fluttered open to an unyielding brightness that felt painfully out of place. Disoriented and struggling to grasp her surroundings, she found herself confined within a cold, sterile hospital room. The sharp scent of antiseptic mingled with the faint hum of machinery, intensifying the stark reality that she was no longer on the familiar ranch. Her head throbbed as if hit by a barrage of tiny hammers, and every limb screamed in protest from the impact of her fall. The fragmented memories of that chaotic escape, bumpy roads, that eerie growl, slipped away into the recesses of her mind, leaving behind a chilling uncertainty. Lena attempted to sit up, but a searing pain shot through her body, anchoring her to the stiff hospital bed. The walls, painted in a pale clinical white, were lined with stark fluorescent lights that cast harsh shadows, creating an atmosphere more reminiscent of a punishment cell than a place of healing. She could barely remember how she ended up here. Yet the lingering remnants of her ordeal clung to her like a second skin. A sense of betrayal and isolation pulsed through her veins, as though the sanctuary of home had transformed into a labyrinth of torment. Before she could gather her thoughts, the door burst open with abrupt authority. 2 nurses and a solemn doctor rushed in, their expressions a mix of concern and urgency. The nurses' voices were soft, almost whispered, as they murmured something about the Alpha and Luna. Their hushed tones sent a chill down Lena's spine. Words she barely understood, terms imbued with a weight that transcended normal human hierarchy, filled the room with a sense of foreboding mystery. Who was this Alpha? And why did the nurses speak of Luna as if it were a destiny rather than a title? The doctor, his face lined with worry and the strain of secrets, approached her bedside. "We need to keep you calm, Lena," he said, his tone both compassionate and clinical. "The Alpha will be here soon." His words echoed in the sterile silence, each syllable laden with implication. Lena's mind whirled with questions. Who exactly was controlling her fate? And what did it mean to be connected to something, or someone, called the Alpha? The introduction of these terms in such a detached manner felt cold and impersonal, as if her pain and fear were just parts of a grander, inexplicable plan. In the midst of the chaos, Lena's thoughts roiled. She tried to recall the details of her escape, how the sound of that deep, resonant growl had seemed both a warning and an allure. Now, all she felt was an overwhelming sense of betrayal. Was she merely a pawn in someone else's mysterious game? The realization that she might be trapped not just physically, but but in a web of supernatural obligations, sparked a deep, gnawing dread within her. Her body trembled as the nurses gently adjusted the IV in her arm, their efficiency belying the urgency in their eyes. Every movement seemed calculated, as though the room itself was a stage where a dreadful drama was about to unfold. Lena's internal monologue surged with raw emotion, a cocktail of fear, confusion, and anger. How could she have been so naive, to think that running away from this suffocating isolation would grant her freedom? Instead, she now found herself ensnared in a nightmare that was only beginning to reveal its dark dimensions. In her haze of pain and vulnerability, Lena felt a spark of defiance. Despite the cold clinical environment, a small burning question emerged. Who was really in control here? The mysterious Alpha? Or was there something even more sinister at play? Her mind clung to the fragments of her memories, desperate for a clue that might illuminate the shadowy figures now dictating her fate. The presence of the doctor, with his furtive glances and carefully chosen words, hinted at secrets that were not meant for her ears. Yet, the more they spoke, the more Lena felt the crushing weight of her own insignificance. As the doctors and nurses prepared to leave, promising that the Alpha would arrive soon, Lena's heart pounded in a relentless rhythm. She closed her eyes briefly, willing herself to sink into the sterile bed and block out the relentless tide of confusion. But the questions swirled in her mind like a storm. What had she done to earn this fate? Why had her desperate bid for freedom led her into the clutches of an unknown power? And most of all, what did it mean for her future, tethered now to these haunting titles and the promise of an inevitable reckoning? In that moment of painful clarity, Lena realized that this hospital room, with its harsh lights and cold air, was not a sanctuary, but the beginning of an even darker chapter in her life. Every beep of the monitor, every whispered conversation among the staff, deepened the mystery that now shrouded her existence. The weight of betrayal, by those she trusted and by fate itself, pressed down on her, leaving her to wonder if any escape was truly possible. Yet, amid the despair, a faint glimmer of hope flickered in her chest. If this enigmatic Alpha and the looming concept of Luna were keys to understanding her plight, then perhaps they also held the promise of a deeper, more profound truth. A truth that might one day liberate her from the nightmare in which she now awoke. With that small, stubborn hope anchoring her, Lena resolved that even in the cold sterility of this place, she would not let herself be consumed by the darkness without a fight. The Alpha's claim. In the oppressive stillness of the hospital room, Lena found herself ensnared in a web of restraint, both physical and emotional. The cold, sterile walls now felt like the confines of a gilded cage, every surface a reminder of her captivity. Her wrists were secured by soft, yet unyielding restraints that bit into her skin, and the steady hum of the monitors seemed to echo the relentless thud of her heart. The room, illuminated by harsh fluorescent lights, provided no comfort, only a stark stage upon which a dark destiny was unfolding. It was then that a deep, resonant voice broke through the sterile silence, a voice so commanding it seemed to emanate from the very depths of the building itself. "Open your eyes, Lena," it ordered, its tone a mix of authority and something almost hypnotic. The voice was not just heard, it was felt, vibrating through her very core, igniting a fire of fear and fascination within her. The sound was both alluring and terrifying, promising power and warning of the consequences of defiance. Lena's pulse raced as the voice continued. "You belong to me now. Accept the mark, for it is the seal of our bond." Each word was deliberate, imbued with an unsettling certainty that left no room for doubt. The command resonated with an eerie finality, as though her fate had been written long before this moment. As the words washed over her, Lena felt a strange warmth spreading along her skin, a physical manifestation of the mysterious mark that had been whispered about in fragments and half-remembered tales. It was a sensation both exhilarating and deeply painful, like a burning imprint that promised both connection and eternal subjugation. Inside, Lena's thoughts swirled in a tumult of emotions. The mark was unlike anything she had ever experienced. It pulsed with a life of its own, an unyielding reminder of the bond that tethered her to a destiny she neither chose nor fully understood. The oppressive atmosphere of the hospital, once a symbol of possible rescue, now only magnified the sense of inevitability. Every command from the deep, commanding voice, every subtle flicker of the monitors, echoed the truth that she was no longer free. Her life was irrevocably entwined with the Alpha's claim. She tried to pull away from the restraints, her mind, screaming for escape, but the bindings held firm, as if infused with the very power of the voice that now ruled her. With each attempt, a surge of both physical pain and emotional dread surged through her, reinforcing the notion that resistance was futile. The voice's presence was inescapable, a constant, reverberating force that pressed down on her, leaving her with the unshakable impression that her will was slowly being eroded by the weight of this supernatural bond. In a rare moment of introspection, Lena's inner voice rose above the din of her terror. Is this what it means to be marked? She wondered, her thoughts trembling between despair and a peculiar, forbidden intrigue. The mark was not just a physical imprint. It was a symbol of power, of connection, and of a fate that demanded surrender. It promised strength and belonging, yet it came at the steep price of her autonomy. Each time the Alpha's voice commanded her, it was as if a piece of her resistance crumbled, replaced by a reluctant acceptance that left her both enraged and inexplicably drawn to the darkness that now defined her existence. The clinical efficiency of the nurses and the detached concern in the doctor's eyes did little to ease her inner turmoil. They moved about the room like mere cogs in a machine, their roles reduced to managing the aftermath of the Alpha's claim without ever questioning the true nature of the bond that had been imposed upon her. Their whispered mentions of the Alpha and Lena were not enough to satisfy her growing need for understanding. Each term was wrapped in mystery, hinting at a hierarchy and destiny that felt as ancient as it was predatory. As the hours stretched on, Lena's eyes flickered between the cold clinical reality of the room and the vivid, almost tactile memory of that commanding voice. Its resonance lingered in her ears like an indelible echo, each repetition reinforcing the stark truth. She was now a part of something much larger than herself. The sense of inevitability was overwhelming, a realization that her life, her emotions, and even her very soul were now inextricably bound to forces she barely comprehended. Yet, amid the suffocating despair and creeping submission, a fragile spark of defiance still flickered within her. Deep in her heart, Lena clung to the belief that understanding the nature of this mark might be the key to reclaiming her destiny, or at least to unraveling the secrets that had ensnared her. It was a dangerous thought, one that dared to challenge the authority of the Alpha, but it also offered the possibility of a deeper, more profound freedom that lay hidden beneath layers of supernatural control. In the oppressive quiet, with the Alpha's voice still echoing in the sterile corridors of the hospital, Lena's inner conflict raged on. The mark was both her curse and her connection, a physical reminder of a bond that promised to reshape her life in ways she had never imagined. The true nature of this connection, whether it was a force of love, domination, or something far more ambiguous, remained shrouded in darkness. And as she lay there, restrained and marked, Lena couldn't help but wonder if the key to her salvation lay in surrendering to this fate, or in fighting against the inescapable claim of the Alpha. Tad, bound by fate. Lena's desperation reached its peak as she strained against the restraints that held her captive in the sterile hospital room. With each futile tug at the soft, unyielding bindings, she felt an overwhelming surge of both physical pain and emotional anguish. The restraints, cold and clinical, had become a symbol of the invisible chains that now tethered her to a destiny she never chose. Every muscle in her body ached as she pulled, her heart pounding like a frantic drum, echoing the relentless turmoil inside her. The room around her was a whirlwind of chaos. The incessant beep of the monitors, the hurried footsteps of nurses, and the urgent murmurs of doctors created a dissonant symphony that only heightened her sense of entrapment. In the midst of this controlled pandemonium, Lena's mind was a storm of frantic thoughts. Memories of fleeting freedom, the haunting echo of the Alpha's voice, and the gnawing realization that she was deeply, inescapably trapped. As the nurses moved in and out, their faces a blur of efficiency and concern, Lena's attempts to free herself grew more desperate. With trembling fingers, she tried to loosen the straps, her skin burning under the friction. Each movement was accompanied by sharp, searing pain, a physical manifestation of her internal struggle. It was as if the very act of resistance was designed to remind her of her vulnerability, to assert the dominance of a force that held her in its grip. Her eyes darted around the room, capturing fleeting images of the sterile environment, a cold, metallic bed, the stark white walls, and the harsh fluorescent lights that bathed everything in an unforgiving glare. Yet, amid this chaos, there were moments when her eyes caught a glimpse of something far more disturbing, the shadow of the Alpha's presence, lurking just beyond the periphery. It was not visible, but it was there, a constant threat that seeped into every corner of her mind. The nurse's hushed whispers about his imminent return sent shivers down her spine, reinforcing the certainty that her captivity was not merely physical, but deeply rooted in a supernatural bond. Every so often, the chaotic buzz of the hospital was pierced by intrusive voices, fragments of conversation that spoke of duty, of power, and of an ancient claim that none could defy. One doctor's low, urgent tone resonated in her ears. "He must return soon. We must prepare for his arrival." Such words carried an air of inevitability, as if the very fabric of her reality was woven with threads of fate that she could neither sever nor escape. The disjointed symphony of sounds amplified Lena's internal conflict, each note a reminder of the forces that were both oppressing and inexplicably drawing her in. Amid the frenzied movement, Lena's body convulsed with a mix of agony and determination. Her mind, clouded by pain and defiance, rebelled against the restraints. Every attempt to free herself was a battle, a struggle not just against the physical bindings, but against the inexorable pull of a destiny she could neither deny nor understand. The sensation of the mark along her skin, a constant reminder of the Alpha's claim, throbbed like an unwanted heartbeat, deep and persistent. It was a mark that was both a curse and a connection, a symbol of the fate that had sealed her, binding her to the mysterious force that now dictated her every moment. As the minutes turned into what felt like an eternity, Lena's vision blurred between the harsh reality of the hospital and the vivid images of the outside world. The open roads, the whispering wind, the taste of freedom that had so tantalizingly slipped from her grasp. In those fleeting visions, she saw herself running, unburdened and wild, away from the suffocating confines of her current prison. Yet, each time she willed herself to rise, the reality of her restraints and the looming threat of the Alpha's return pulled her back into a dark, oppressive truth. In the silence that followed her desperate struggles, a bitter cocktail of emotions began to swirl within her, a heady mixture of defiance and a dangerous, inexplicable attachment. There was a part of her that loathed the very thing that held her captive, that rebelled against the imposed destiny and the unyielding claim of the Alpha. And yet, another part of her was magnetically drawn to it, as if the pain and the mark were intertwined with a promise of something profound, something that could change her very essence. Lena's breath came in ragged gasps as she lay back against the unyielding hospital bed, her mind racing through a labyrinth of conflicting emotions. Every pulse of pain was a reminder of her captivity. Every fleeting thought of escape was a desperate plea for freedom. But as the intrusive voices of the hospital staff faded into the background, replaced by the echo of her own heart, she found herself caught in the paradox of her existence. A fierce, burning desire to break free, juxtaposed with an unsettling, dangerous attachment to the very force that bound her. In that charged moment of vulnerability and defiance, Lena resolved that she would not let the Alpha's claim define her entirely. The path ahead was shrouded in darkness and uncertainty, but deep within her, a spark of rebellion flickered, a spark that refused to be extinguished by pain, fear, or the inevitability of fate. Even as she remained physically restrained, her spirit surged with a silent promise that she would continue to fight for her freedom, no matter how deeply the chains of destiny might have been forged. The price of a mate. Lena's eyes caught a glimmer in the mirror, a flash of something unusual along the curve of her neck. At first, she thought it was a trick of the harsh fluorescent light, a mere smudge on the otherwise pale skin. But as she leaned closer, her breath trembling with trepidation, she saw it clearly. A distinct, jagged mark, dark and almost pulsing, etched into her flesh. It wasn't a scar born of an injury, but a symbol, deliberate and enigmatic. The mark seemed to whisper secrets in an ancient tongue, a silent testament to a bond forged without her consent. For several long, agonizing moments, Lena stared at her reflection, her mind a storm of emotions. The mark's presence was both beautiful and repulsive, a physical embodiment of the irreversible connection imposed upon her. It glowed faintly, its edges blurred as if it were still forming, a living imprint of something that had claimed her in more ways than one. The realization struck her hard. This was the price of being a mate, the cost of belonging to a fate she had never chosen. Her thoughts spiraled into a torrent of internal monologue, each reflection tinged with betrayal and anguish. How could I have been so naive, she wondered, the words echoing in the sterile silence of the hospital room. This mark, this unwanted seal, was a permanent reminder of the Alpha's claim, a claim that felt both predatory and oddly magnetic. It was a wound that would never heal, a constant burning reminder that her life was now inextricably linked to a destiny dictated by forces beyond her control. As she traced the contours of the mark with her fingertips, a mix of desire and revulsion swirled within her. Part of her was inexplicably drawn to the power it symbolized, the forbidden promise of connection and belonging that had been forced upon her. Yet another part recoiled in horror at the loss of autonomy, at the irreversible act of marking that had shattered the illusion of freedom. It was as if the mark was a physical manifestation of a cosmic contract, one that demanded not just submission, but a transformation of her very identity. The oppressive weight of this realization pressed down on her chest, each beat of her heart, a painful reminder of the unyielding bond. Lena's mind raced through memories of whispered promises and dark, commanding voices that had spoken of fate and inevitability. This mark is my curse, she thought bitterly, feeling an overwhelming surge of betrayal. It wasn't merely a mark on her skin. It was a seal on her soul, a signature of a destiny that would forever alter the course of her life. Questions began to claw at the edges of her consciousness. What did this mark truly mean for her future? Would it grant her some hidden power or simply serve as a shackle, binding her to a life of perpetual submission? The duality of her emotions, torn between a forbidden desire for the connection it represented and a fierce need to reclaim her freedom, created an inner conflict that was as painful as it was inescapable. Every thought of the mark's origin sent ripples of uncertainty through her, stirring a dangerous curiosity. What ancient ritual or twisted vow had dictated that she should bear this mark? And who or what would be the ultimate arbiter of her fate because of it? In that reflective moment, Lena's mind became a battlefield for conflicting emotions. The allure of a profound, perhaps even mystical connection warred against the instinctual drive for independence. The mark, dark and enigmatic, was not simply a physical alteration. It was an emblem of control, a brand that declared her as the mate of a force far greater than herself. Yet buried beneath the layers of anger and despair, there flickered a small, defiant hope. A whisper that perhaps understanding the mark might unlock a path to self-liberation, or at least reveal secrets that could change her destiny. Outside, the hospital room remained cold and unyielding, its clinical brightness a stark contrast to the turbulent darkness that now resided within her. The buzz of the machines, the soft shuffle of footsteps in the hallway, and even the distant murmur of voices all blended into a background score that accentuated the enormity of what she now faced. Lena could feel the mark's energy pulsing beneath her skin, as if it were alive and aware, a constant, silent reminder of the pact that had been etched into her very being. As she sat in that isolating space, Lena's eyes returned to the mirror, one last time. The reflection staring back at her was not just her own, but a fusion of vulnerability and a burgeoning defiance. The mark, with all its dangerous implications, was the physical embodiment of a choice forced upon her. A choice between surrender and the desperate pursuit of freedom. In that heart-wrenching moment of self-confrontation, she vowed silently that she would not allow this mark to define her entirely. Instead, she would seek to understand its secrets, even if that path led her through darkness and betrayal. And so, with the weight of the mark anchoring her fate, Lena's journey took on a new, haunting dimension. The price of being a mate was now inscribed on her skin, a constant reminder of the bond that had altered her destiny forever. Yet, beneath the layers of fear and repulsion, a spark of determination ignited, urging her to forge a path through this intricate maze of desire and control. The mark was not the end. It was merely the beginning of a story that was destined to unravel in ways she could neither predict nor fully comprehend. Conflicted hearts. Lena's trembling fingers clenched the edge of the worn hospital blanket as she stared at Lewis, the alpha, whose piercing gaze now held the weight of unspoken secrets. The charged silence in the room crackled like an electric current, each moment stretching into an eternity of raw, seething emotion. The mark on her neck, once a distant and mysterious imprint, now burned like a brand of betrayal. It was the physical manifestation of an intrusion into her very soul, a cruel reminder that her autonomy had been stolen in the name of a supernatural destiny she never chose. Why? Lena's voice trembled with a mix of fury and sorrow as she finally broke the silence. Why did you mark me without my consent? Her words were laced with a bitter cocktail of pain and defiance, the kind that leaves scars not only on the skin, but deep within the heart. Every syllable carried the weight of her shattered trust, a trust that had been built over years of longing for freedom, only to be torn apart by this relentless, unyielding claim. Lewis's eyes flickered with a tumult of emotions. Regret, determination, and something darker that lurked just beneath the surface. His voice, deep and resonant, came out slowly, each word measured and deliberate. Lena, it was never meant to be an invasion, he murmured, his tone echoing with a haunting blend of remorse and command. The mark. It's a symbol, a bond that connects us beyond the limitations of mortal choice. You are meant to be mine, to share a destiny far greater than what you can imagine. His words, intended to be comforting, only deepened the chasm between them. Lena's heart pounded in her chest, her eyes blazing with a cocktail of anger and heartbreak. A destiny? Is that what you call it? She spat, her voice rising with an intensity that filled the sterile room with raw emotion. I never asked for any destiny, Lewis. I never wanted to be tethered to you, to have my very being dictated by some ancient, twisted tradition. Her words sliced through the air, each one a desperate plea for the restoration of her autonomy, a plea that trembled between fierce determination and profound sorrow. The atmosphere became almost suffocating as Louis stepped closer, his presence both magnetic and oppressive. The tension between them was palpable, a clash of wills, a collision of two souls bound by forces they could neither fully control nor comprehend. The clinical hum of the hospital seemed to fade away, replaced by the heartbeat of the room. Each pulse a resounding echo of their internal conflict. "You speak of betrayal," Louis said, his voice softening as he reached out, his hand hovering near the mark on her neck. "But know this, Lena. This mark is not a curse. It is a gift, a connection that empowers us both. It is the seal of our bond, ensuring that we are never truly alone." His tone, though gentle, carried an undertone of something more possessive, an assertion of control that was impossible to ignore. Lena recoiled as if struck. "A gift?" she whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief and despair. "It feels more like a chain, one that locks me away from everything I've ever known, from the freedom I fought so hard to keep." The words spilled out in a torrent, revealing the depth of her internal struggle. In her voice, there was both a longing for what once was and an unyielding resolve to reclaim what had been stolen from her. For a long, excruciating moment, neither spoke, their eyes locked in a battle of unspoken truths. The room was filled with the silent thunder of conflicting emotions, a fierce blend of twisted desire, bitter resentment, and a desperate hunger for liberation. It was as if the very air vibrated with the tension of two hearts clashing, each beat a war cry for control and freedom. Finally, Lena's voice broke through the charged silence, trembling yet resolute. "I'm done living under this fate," she declared, her words echoing like a battle cry in the cold, clinical space. "I won't be your pawn, your mark, or your destined mate. I am more than this chain you've forced upon me. I deserve a life that I choose for myself, one where I am free to love, to laugh, and to be." In that moment, the fierce determination in her eyes burned brighter than any fear. The raw hurt and betrayal had transformed into a potent resolve, a promise to herself that she would fight, no matter the cost, to reclaim her autonomy and redefine her destiny. Louis's expression hardened, caught between the remnants of his own desires and the inescapable truth of her defiance. The tension in the room crackled like a storm on the verge of breaking, each of their hearts pounding to the rhythm of impending change. Lena, standing there with a heart full of conflicted emotions and a voice that trembled with newfound strength, had declared war on the destiny that had been thrust upon her. And in that declaration lay the seed of an epic internal battle, a struggle that would determine not only her fate, but the very essence of who she was meant to be. Breaking free, the room felt unbearably small, every second stretching into an eternity as Lena's resolve solidified into a desperate need to escape. With trembling fingers, she began gathering her belongings, each item a bittersweet reminder of the life that once was, now tainted by betrayal and forced destiny. The cool touch of a cherished scarf, the worn pages of an old diary, even the simple convenience of her phone, all became tokens of her personal history, each piece a silent testament to the freedom she yearned for. Tears blurred her vision as she moved with frantic determination. The sound of her own heartbeat, loud and insistent, seemed to echo off the sterile walls. Every beat carried the weight of her loss, the crushing reality of being bound by a mark she had never chosen, a bond imposed by an alpha who believed destiny belonged solely to him. Lena's mind raced with memories of happier times when she had been free to choose her own path, her laughter echoing in sunlit fields. Now, each piece of her scattered past only intensified the aching void of her isolation. The oppressive silence of the room was suddenly shattered by the heavy thud of her hurried footsteps as she made her escape. In one swift, heart-pounding moment, she flung open the door and bolted down the corridor. The clatter of her belongings, a bag tumbling, a book slipping from her grasp, mingled with her ragged breaths, creating a chaotic symphony of defiance. The cool, dim hallway, illuminated by harsh overhead lights, offered no solace. It was as if every shadow whispered warnings that fate might be drawing her back. But still she ran, driven by a primal need for liberation. Outside, the world was a blur of uncertainty and possibility. The night air hit her like a shock, its chill both invigorating and foreboding. Lena's eyes darted around, searching for any sign of safety or escape. The scent of damp earth and distant rain mingled with the lingering aroma of antiseptic from behind, creating a disorienting contrast. Each step forward was a battle, a mix of adrenaline, fury, and sorrow that propelled her deeper into the unknown. Her heart pounded so fiercely that it drowned out the chaotic noise of her escape. The corridors she dashed through were a labyrinth of sterile white walls and echoing footfalls. With every turn, the thought of the Alpha's looming presence tightened its grip on her, as if fate itself was whispering, "You cannot truly leave." Yet, beneath that oppressive whisper, a defiant voice rose within her, a promise to reclaim her life, to break free of the chains that had been forged on her skin and soul. The flash of cold, unforgiving lights and the distant sound of urgent voices spurred Lena onward. She could almost taste the freedom on the wind, a tang of hope mixed with the bitter sting of betrayal. The sensation was overwhelming, each moment both a risk and a necessity. Her mind conjured vivid images of a future unburdened by the heavy mark, a future where her heart could once again beat freely without the constant reminder of the Alpha's claim. Yet, every step away from that oppressive room also brought with it the echo of doubt. Was this escape real, or merely a fleeting illusion in a world where fate was inescapable? As she darted through a narrow hallway, the sounds of distant voices and the heavy, measured footsteps of someone pursuing her pricked at her senses. The cold realization dawned upon her that freedom, if it existed, would not come without a fight. The relentless pressure of the past and the unknown future seemed to merge into one crushing force. Lena's lungs burned as she ran, and her vision blurred with tears, both of pain and of fierce determination. Every nerve in her body screamed out a plea for liberation, urging her to leave behind the shackles of the Alpha's dominance. And yet, deep within her, a dangerous, inexplicable attachment still lurked, whispering that parting with the past might come at a cost far higher than she could bear. At the threshold of a dark, uncertain passageway, Lena paused briefly. The quiet was almost overwhelming, and for a moment, she hesitated, her hand resting on the cool metal of the door handle as she peered into the murky unknown beyond. In that fleeting second of stillness, her heart hammered with both hope and terror. The path ahead promised the possibility of a life reclaimed, but also the risk of being pulled back into a fate she fought so hard to escape. With a resolute breath and eyes steeled by both defiance and vulnerability, Lena stepped into the darkness, leaving behind the oppressive confines of the hospital. The echo of her footsteps faded into the night, and the distant sound of pursuit lingered as a haunting reminder of the forces that sought to reclaim her. In that moment, she vowed that she would fight with every ounce of strength to forge a new destiny, one that was truly her own. But as the door closed behind her with a resounding thud, the audience was left wondering. Would Lena finally break free from the chains of fate? Or was her desperate flight merely the prelude to an inevitable, inescapable return? Into the unknown, Lena's heart pounded like a wild drum as she raced down a long, dim corridor that twisted like a labyrinth of forgotten memories. Every echo of her hurried footsteps reverberated off the sterile walls, a constant reminder of her isolation in a place that was once familiar, but now felt foreign and menacing. The corridors of the hospital, once a place of hope and healing, had morphed into a maze where each turn promised either a glimmer of escape or a deeper plunge into uncertainty. Her mind was a whirlwind of desperation and disorientation. The parkour, cold hum of fluorescent lights overhead did little to alleviate the chill that had seeped into her bones. The scent of antiseptic mixed with a faint, lingering aroma of something unidentifiably human. Perhaps a trace of despair, or the residue of hurried footsteps from those who had come before her. Lena pressed her back against the wall, her breathing ragged as she paused to listen. Distant murmurs, soft and indistinct, reached her ears, a low chorus of voices that hinted at the presence of others like her, trapped in the same maze of confinement. Every fiber of her being screamed for refuge, for a safe haven where she could gather her strength and plan her next move. With trembling determination, she continued her desperate search, her eyes scanning every shadowed alcove and every half-open door. Each doorway was a possibility, a potential passage to freedom, but also a possible trap laid by forces she could not yet comprehend. Her senses were heightened, every creak and whisper amplified into a symphony of both hope and dread. As she navigated the winding corridors, the environment shifted subtly. What had once been stark, clinical hallways now took on an eerie quality, where familiar details were distorted by shadows and the low murmur of unseen voices. The once impersonal buzz of hospital machinery faded into the background, replaced by the soft, rhythmic tapping of her shoes on the cold floor, a constant, lonely beat marking her solitary journey. It was in these moments of profound vulnerability that Lena felt the weight of abandonment the most, the crushing realization that she was utterly alone, left to fend for herself against an unknown fate. Yet, amidst the overwhelming despair, there were hints that she was not entirely forsaken. In one narrow passageway, Lena caught sight of a small, faded poster pinned to the wall. Its message was nearly illegible, but a single, bold phrase caught her eye, a call for unity, for hope. The poster's edges were torn, and the colors had faded, yet it radiated a quiet defiance, as if it were a secret message left by someone who had once dared to dream of escape. That small detail, so inconspicuous yet so charged with meaning, stirred within her a flicker of belief that she might not be the only one fighting these invisible chains. Driven by this glimmer of hope, Lena quickened her pace, her mind fixated on finding more signs, any clue that might lead her to a hidden sanctuary. Every door she passed was examined with a desperate intensity. Some doors were locked tight, their surfaces cold and unyielding, while others stood slightly ajar, inviting yet uncertain. The tension was palpable. Every hesitant knock or gentle push against a door could be the one that led her to safety, or into further danger. Her eyes caught a movement at the far end of a long hallway, where a door, unlike the others, seemed to radiate a subtle warmth. The door was partially concealed behind a faded tapestry, its wood worn smooth by time, yet it exuded an air of quiet promise. Lena's pulse quickened as she approached it. The murmurs in the distance grew slightly louder, more coherent, as if a group of voices, perhaps those of kindred spirits, were gathered on the other side. This door, standing as a solitary beacon amid the stark, unyielding corridors, represented the possibility of sanctuary, a doorway not just to physical refuge, but perhaps to the unraveling of the mysteries that had tormented her since her captivity began. Her trembling hand reached out to touch the cool surface of the door, each second stretching out with the weight of a lifetime. The intricate patterns carved into the wood whispered of hidden stories and secret alliances, hinting that this was not merely an exit, but a gateway to a realm where she might find both safety and answers. A shiver ran down her spine as she pressed her ear against the door, trying to decipher the faint murmur of voices behind it. They spoke in low, urgent tones, a language of hope and rebellion that resonated with the deep, unspoken need in her heart to belong somewhere, to be heard, and to fight back against the forces that had stolen her freedom. With one final, steadying breath, Lena eased the door open. The creak of the hinges was a soft, almost reverent sound, heralding the possibility of a new beginning. As the gap widened, a sliver of dim light spilled into the dark corridor, promising a tentative escape from the suffocating grip of her current prison. The voices behind the door became clearer, layered with both caution and welcome. For a fleeting moment, Lena felt as if the oppressive darkness that had long defined her existence might finally yield to the dawn of an uncertain yet hopeful future. Yet, even as she stepped forward into this promising uncertainty, a part of her remained wary. The path ahead was shrouded in mystery, fraught with perils yet to be revealed. And as the door creaked open wider, Lena could not shake the lingering question. Would this newfound sanctuary truly be a haven? Or was it simply another twist in the relentless maze of fate that seemed determined to keep her captive? A faint light in darkness. In the midst of the relentless uncertainty, Lena discovered fleeting moments that felt almost miraculous, brief glimpses of relief that shattered the oppressive atmosphere of her captivity. In one such moment, as she sat in a quiet corner of the hidden refuge she'd just discovered, a soft voice interrupted her heavy thoughts. It came from a woman whose presence radiated a quiet strength and kindness. The stranger's words were gentle, almost musical. "You're safe here for now." In that instant, Lena's battered heart found a sliver of solace. The unexpected warmth in that simple greeting made the cold, unyielding weight of the mark on her neck seem a little less burdensome, as if, for one precious moment, her fate was not entirely sealed. This brief encounter was a victory amid chaos, a small, defiant act of hope against the constant threat of the Alpha and the crushing inevitability of her supernatural bond. The woman, whose eyes shone with a mixture of compassion and hidden wisdom, introduced herself only as Mara. Her presence carried an air of mystery, hinting at a deeper connection with the secretive world Lena was beginning to grasp. Mara's calm assurance and subtle smile sparked a glimmer of trust in Lena, even as the lingering threat of the Alpha loomed like a dark cloud overhead. For a while, Lena allowed herself to savor these rare moments of respite. As she sat quietly in a small, makeshift nook behind the door of her temporary sanctuary, she felt the soft glow of a flickering lamp and the distant murmur of other captives, the gentle, almost imperceptible hum of life that reminded her she was not alone. The room, though still shadowed by the memories of her torment, now offered a brief haven of solitude and quiet determination. In that brief period of calm, Lena could almost forget the constant pull of the mark and the echo of the Alpha's commanding voice. Every small victory, every kind word, felt like a step toward liberation. Lena's mind wandered to memories of better days, moments of laughter shared with friends, the liberating rush of spontaneous adventures, and the simple joy of being able to choose her own path. Now, every whispered promise of safety, every hint of potential help from Mara or another unexpected ally, lit a small candle of resistance within her. The mark on her neck, once a symbol of her subjugation, now pulsed softly beneath her skin as a reminder of the battle she was determined to fight. Yet, the sense of relief was tempered by the ever-present weight of her circumstances. In the quiet after Mara's comforting words, Lena's thoughts inevitably turned back to the relentless threat that shadowed her every step. The Alpha's influence was not something that could be so easily escaped. It was etched into her very being, a constant reminder of the inescapable fate imposed upon her. The juxtaposition of these fragile moments of liberation against the harsh reality of her bond created an intense internal conflict, a delicate balance between hope and despair, freedom and control. As Lena and Mara exchanged a few more words, the mysterious woman hinted at connections Lena had never before considered. "There is more to this mark than you realize," Mara whispered, her eyes reflecting both sorrow and fierce determination. "It binds you to something ancient and powerful, but it can also be a key. Perhaps with the right guidance, it might lead you to the freedom you so desperately crave." Mara's words, soft and enigmatic, resonated deeply with Lena. They stirred something within her, a renewed determination to seek out the truth behind the mark and to discover if there was a way to break the chains that bound her. With every new revelation, Lena felt both the burden of her past and the weight of her uncertain future pressing down on her. Yet, as the conversation drew to a close and Mara prepared to depart into the murky corridors of their hidden refuge, Lena's spirit began to stir with a sense of defiant possibility. The small sanctuary, filled with the echoes of whispered hopes and gentle reassurances, provided a momentary glimpse of liberation from the dark clutches of the Alpha's claim. Standing at the threshold of this newfound refuge, Lena took a deep, steadying breath. The chill of the unknown still whispered around her, and the ominous power of the mark pulsed beneath her skin, a constant reminder of the danger she faced. But now, bolstered by Mara's kindness and the subtle promise of hidden allies, Lena felt something new awaken within her, a fierce, burning resolve. She stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the dim light ahead, as if drawn by an invisible force promising a future that was not entirely dictated by fate. The path was fraught with peril and shrouded in mystery, yet it was hers to tread. In that vulnerable moment, Lena vowed to embrace every challenge, to fight for every ounce of freedom, and to uncover the secrets that lay hidden in the depths of her bond. And as she moved deeper into the uncertain corridors of her refuge, the faint light in the darkness grew brighter, a beacon of hope that whispered of a liberation yet to be fully claimed, leaving the audience to wonder, could this delicate promise of freedom be the turning point in Lena's relentless battle against the destiny imposed upon her? The Unyielding Bond. In the dim corridors of the hidden refuge, Lena began to sense that she wasn't entirely alone in her struggle. Slowly, as if emerging from a long, numbing sleep, she started reconnecting with others from the pack. A subtle network of beta figures and supportive souls who, like her, had been bound by fate and the enigmatic power of the Alpha. It began with hesitant glances in shared spaces, and then, over time, small exchanges that hinted at a community built on mutual understanding, loyalty, and a complex web of control. One cool, quiet evening, while Lena sat on a worn couch near a narrow window, she heard soft footsteps approaching. A young man with kind, observant eyes, named Marcus, a beta within the pack, paused beside her. "Hey," he said in a gentle tone that immediately softened the harsh edges of her isolation. "I know you're still finding your way here. It's not easy, is it?" His voice carried genuine concern, and for a brief moment, the weight on her chest lightened. Lena hesitated, then replied in a voice barely above a whisper. "No, it's overwhelming. I feel trapped by this bond, like every part of me is under constant surveillance." Marcus nodded, understanding flickering in his gaze. "I felt that way too once, but we're not just captives. We're part of something bigger. Our pack isn't merely about control. It's about protection and survival, even if sometimes the lines blur." His words resonated with a bittersweet familiarity that stirred conflicted emotions deep within her. In the days that followed, Lena slowly ventured into the heart of the refuge, where she encountered others who shared their stories of life under the Alpha's command. There was Tessa, a woman whose resilient spirit shone through despite years of obedience, and Jordan, a quiet, steadfast presence whose calm demeanor belied a fierce loyalty to the pack. Their interactions, though laced with tension, held a warmth that made Lena question if the bonds that tethered them were entirely oppressive, or if they also offered a form of support in a world that had become so cruel and isolating. During one long, hushed conversation in a secluded corner of the refuge, Tessa confided, "I've spent years wondering if these connections are our prison or our protection. Sometimes I think the very thing that binds us is the only thing keeping us safe from the chaos outside." Her words, filled with sorrow and resilience, left Lena deep in thought. Was the pack's code of loyalty a genuine bond of care, or just another means of control exerted by the Alpha? This question swirled relentlessly in her mind as she observed the dynamics around her. In quieter moments, Lena found herself reflecting on the intricate balance between love and dominance. The pack operated under a strict code, a mixture of unspoken rules and enforced loyalty. Every member was expected to support one another, yet the undercurrent of control was never far from the surface. At times, the pack's camaraderie seemed genuine, a network of kindred souls united by shared pain and the hope for a better future. At other moments, the loyalty felt suffocating, as though every act of kindness was shadowed by an unyielding reminder of their subjugation. One evening, while walking along a narrow corridor lined with old photographs of past pack gatherings, Lena overheard a hushed discussion between two betas. "Do you think she'll ever fully understand what it means to be part of this family?" One asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. The other replied, "Maybe. Or maybe she'll see it for what it truly is. A delicate balance between support and control. Only time will tell if these bonds are our salvation or our undoing." Those words reverberated in Lena's mind as she continued her solitary walk, the echo of their dialogue stirring a potent mix of hope and fear. In the reflective solitude that followed, Lena began to recognize the subtle beauty of these relationships. Despite the pervasive tension, there was an unspoken support among them. A shared understanding that even as the Alpha's presence loomed large, they could find strength in unity. Each conversation, every shared smile or sigh, chipped away at the isolation that had once seemed insurmountable. Yet, even as she embraced these connections, a lingering question gnawed at her. Were these bonds truly supportive? Or were they merely another form of control, binding her to a destiny she desperately wished to escape? As night fell, and the corridors grew silent once more, Lena sat by a small, dim lamp, her thoughts heavy with uncertainty and burgeoning resolve. The pack's conflicting dynamics, both a sanctuary and a shackle, had left an indelible mark on her soul. But within that complexity, she discovered a spark of defiance. A quiet determination began to form, a resolve to unravel the truth behind these bonds, to reclaim the freedom that had been slowly eroded by both love and control. In that moment, as she gazed at her reflection in a cracked mirror, Lena whispered a vow to herself, a promise that she would navigate the unyielding bond of the pack on her own terms. The path ahead was shrouded in ambiguity, teetering on the edge of liberation and inevitable subjugation. And though the question of whether these connections were a lifeline or another form of confinement still lingered, one thing was clear. Lena was ready to confront it all. The battle for her autonomy had only just begun, and the true nature of these bonds, supportive or oppressive, would be unveiled in the days to come. Marked by destiny, Lena's mind became a battlefield, where the weight of the mark and the destiny it imposed clashed with every fiber of her being. Late at night, when the corridors were hushed, and the distant hum of the refuge settled into a quiet lull, she would often find herself alone with her thoughts. The mark, a dark, jagged emblem etched into her skin, pulsed beneath her flesh as if alive, a constant, unyielding reminder of the bond that had been forcibly sealed upon her. It was a physical testament to a fate that she never chose, and yet one that now defined every aspect of her existence. In the dim light of a solitary lamp, Lena traced the contours of the mark with trembling fingertips. The cool, unyielding texture of her skin under her touch evoked a bitter mix of pain and anger. She recalled the moment it had appeared, the way the Alpha's voice had echoed through the sterile room, pronouncing it as the seal of their union. At that moment, the mark had seemed like an abstract symbol, a promise of power and belonging. But now, as she examined it closely, the reality was far more oppressive. It was a chain that bound her to a destiny ruled by forces she neither understood nor desired. Her internal conflict raged on, a slow-burning fire fueled by betrayal and longing. Every pulse of the mark seemed to echo with the Alpha's claim, a reminder that she was no longer entirely her own. Lena felt the mark's energy deep within her, an almost palpable force that dictated her thoughts, emotions, and even her dreams. Anger surged through her veins, a searing defiance against the injustice of being marked without consent. Why must my fate be written on my skin? She thought bitterly, her mind a whirlwind of resentment and sorrow. Yet, amid the simmering anger, there were moments of strange, painful acceptance. The mark had become an inescapable part of her, a cruel, relentless companion that she could neither remove nor ignore. In those quiet moments, when the chaos of the day had faded into the silence of the night, Lena's heart would soften just a fraction. She began to wonder if this mark, with all its oppressive weight, might also be a key a doorway to understanding her place in a larger mystical tapestry of destiny. The idea was both terrifying and, in a twisted way, comforting. It suggested that there might be a deeper purpose behind her suffering, a meaning hidden in the relentless pull of fate. In these reflective moments, Lena's thoughts wandered to the stories she had once heard about the supernatural bonds that tied mates together, a legacy passed down through generations, laden with both beauty and anguish. The mark was more than a symbol of subjugation. It was a promise of connection, a link between her and the ancient, formidable force of the Alpha. And yet, it also robbed her of the freedom to choose her own path, trapping her in a destiny that felt predetermined and unyielding. The dichotomy of this connection tormented her. The desire for the strength and unity it represented was inseparable from the painful loss of her autonomy. Lena's inner turmoil was painted in rich, evocative colors, each emotion a stroke on the canvas of her soul. The pain was visceral, a physical agony that radiated from the mark itself, mingling with the sorrow of a life taken over by an unseen force. Her thoughts were punctuated by memories of what she once was, a free spirit who chose her own adventures, whose life was filled with spontaneous laughter and unbridled joy. Now, every beat of her heart was tethered to the mark. Every thought a reminder of the destiny that had been forcibly etched into her skin. As the night deepened, Lena sat by the window, gazing out at the starless sky. The quiet was both oppressive and strangely serene, as if the world outside were holding its breath, waiting for her next move. In that stillness, she pondered the heavy cost of belonging, to be marked, to be claimed, and to be bound by an ancient covenant she neither desired nor understood. Could there ever be a way to reclaim the freedom that had been so ruthlessly stripped away from her? Or was she doomed to live a life defined by the Alpha's claim, her very existence forever tethered to a fate she could not escape? The question lingered in the cool night air, echoing in the silence of her solitude. Lena's eyes, reflecting the faint glow of the lamp, filled with determination, tempered by sorrow. She resolved, in that moment of raw vulnerability, to seek out the truth behind the mark, to unravel the mysteries of her destiny, however painful that journey might be. And even as the mark continued to pulse with an indifferent, inexorable force, a fragile hope began to take root in her heart. Was there a future where the mark could be both a symbol of unity and a beacon of liberation? Or would it remain an unyielding chain, a constant reminder of a destiny imposed upon her by forces beyond her control? As Lena's mind drifted into uncertain dreams, the oppressive weight of the mark pressed on her, leaving her to wonder if true freedom could ever be found, or if she was forever bound by a fate marked by destiny. Yearning for freedom. In the quiet aftermath of a long, soul-wrenching night, Lena found her mind drifting back to the life she once knew, a life far removed from the oppressive isolation of the ranch. As she sat by a small, rain-speckled window, the soft glow of dawn cast fragile light on her weary face, stirring memories of a vibrant past in Manchester. There, her world had been alive with endless possibility, filled with the laughter of family and friends, the familiar hum of busy streets, and dreams that soared as high as the city's skyline. In Manchester, every corner held a story, a bustling market where the aroma of fresh coffee and warm pastries mingled with the sound of street musicians, or quiet afternoons spent wandering through green parks where the laughter of children echoed. Lena recalled the warm embrace of her family gatherings, the friendly banter that filled living rooms, and the shared moments that wove a tapestry of belonging and identity. These recollections, so vivid and full of life, now clashed sharply with the stark, lonely reality of the ranch. At the ranch, the once comforting memories now only served as a painful reminder of what she had lost. The sprawling, barren fields and the creaking, weathered buildings around her were a far cry from the vibrant energy of Manchester. The vast, open spaces offered no solace, only an echo of silence that amplified the ache of isolation. Here, the absence of her loved ones, the absence of the familiar sounds and sights, gnawed at her soul. Every day felt like a slow erasure of the life she had once known, replaced by a cold, relentless routine and the burden of a destiny imposed upon her. Yet, even amid this harsh reality, a stubborn seed of hope began to sprout within Lena's heart. As she gazed out at the desolate landscape, her mind wandered to the hints of escape hidden in the shadows of her memories. There were moments, fleeting as they were, when the city's vibrant spirit felt almost tangible. Whispers of old songs, the faint scent of rain on city pavement, and echoes of laughter that seemed to drift on the wind. These memories, filled with both warmth and sorrow, were like keys to a door she longed to unlock. They reminded her that she had once been part of a world brimming with life, and perhaps, somewhere within that past, lay clues to reclaiming her freedom. The contrast between her two worlds was stark and painful. In Manchester, Lena had embraced spontaneity and independence, venturing out on impulsive adventures, meeting new people, and dreaming of a future that was hers to create. There was an electrifying sense of possibility in every new day, a promise that she could shape her destiny with her own hands. But here at the ranch, her dreams had been smothered under layers of imposed duty and supernatural restraint. The mark on her skin, the unyielding claim of the alpha, had robbed her of that vibrant freedom, chaining her to a fate that felt both predestined and inescapable. In the quiet of the early morning, as soft light crept through the window and the chill of the night faded, Lena made a silent promise to herself. She would not allow the painful echoes of her past to be buried under the weight of her current torment. Instead, she would use them as a beacon, an unyielding reminder of who she once was and who she could become again. The memories of Manchester were not just relics of a lost life. They were the blueprint for her liberation, hints of the strength and resilience that had once defined her. With each recollection, Lena's determination grew. She resolved that she would search for every trace of her old life, every clue that might guide her towards escape or transformation. Her heart ached with both the loss of those joyful moments and the burning desire to reclaim them, to rebuild a life that was not dictated by fate, but chosen by her own will. The pain of isolation was profound, but it was tempered by a fierce longing, a yearning for the laughter, the warmth, and the unbounded freedom that once filled her days. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows over the barren landscape, Lena felt the stirrings of rebellion within her. The distant memories of Manchester were calling out, urging her to break free from the chains that bound her, both physical and metaphysical. And so, with a resolute gaze and a heart heavy with both grief and hope, she vowed to reclaim a piece of her old life. In that determined moment, as she whispered her promise to the silent morning, Lena set the stage for an epic struggle. A fight not just for freedom, but for the very essence of who she was meant to be. Yet, even as the promise of liberation began to kindle a flame of hope within her, a lingering question remained. Was her past truly a sanctuary of freedom, or merely a distant echo of a life that was now irretrievably lost? The journey ahead was uncertain, the path fraught with danger and doubt. But one thing was clear. Lena's yearning for freedom would drive her forward, as she stepped into the light of a new day, determined to reclaim her destiny no matter the cost. Allies in the shadows. In the dim corridors of the refuge, as Lena continued her search for freedom, unexpected figures began to emerge from the darkness. Figures who carried both the burden of the pack and the promise of unexpected solidarity. One evening, while she was quietly gathering her scattered belongings in a secluded corner, a soft knock at the door startled her. With a hesitant hand, she opened it to reveal a familiar, warm smile and eyes that sparkled with determination. "Lena, it's good to see you," said Lisa, a spirited young woman with an unyielding presence. Her voice was gentle, yet firm, as if to say that despite the chaos, there was still hope. "I've been watching over you since you arrived. We all know what you've been through." Behind Lisa, another figure stepped forward. A calm, quietly confident man named Jordan, whose reassuring gaze and measured words spoke of a deep understanding of the pack's intricate dynamics. "Sometimes," Jordan began, his tone both thoughtful and cautious, "the bonds we share can be as much a prison as they are a protection." His words, delivered with a crisp clarity, resonated with Lena's own conflicted feelings. The moment was charged with a quiet intensity, and for the first time since her forced captivity, Lena felt a glimmer of genuine connection, a sense that she wasn't alone in her struggle. In the days that followed, these new allies slowly drew Lena into their fold. Gathered in a modest, candlelit room away from the prying eyes of the more oppressive figures of the pack, they spoke candidly about their shared pasts and the cruel fates that had bound them. Lisa's voice broke through the silence as she recalled, "We're all marked by destiny in one way or another, Lena. But it doesn't mean we have to surrender ourselves completely. There's always a way to reclaim a piece of who we truly are." Her words, full of quiet defiance, sparked something within Lena, a tiny ember of hope amid the constant threat of the Alpha's claim. As the group grew more comfortable with one another, a pivotal confrontation erupted one evening when tensions finally peaked. In a shadowed corridor near the heart of the refuge, a heated argument broke out between two members of the pack. Voices clashed like swords, sharp, insistent, and laced with raw emotion. One of the senior betas, his face etched with worry, demanded, "You must accept the bond. It is our duty, our way of surviving." His tone was both commanding and desperate, revealing the extent to which fear had driven them to uphold this supernatural order. In the midst of the confrontation, a younger pack member shouted, "But at what cost? Our lives are being stripped away, our choices taken from us." The dispute escalated, and amidst the cacophony of clashing voices, hidden truths began to surface. Whispered accounts of forbidden rituals, ancient pacts, and the true nature of the mark that now sealed their fates. Lena listened, her heart pounding as she realized that this was not merely an internal squabble. It was a battle for the very soul of the pack, a struggle to determine whether the bonds of destiny were meant to protect or to subjugate. The confrontation left Lena reeling, each word and accusation a reminder of her own inner conflict. She felt the weight of the mark intensify, as if the very air around her had thickened with the pressure of unspoken secrets. Yet, in that moment of chaos, Lisa reached out and took her hand. "We don't have to be defined by what they force upon us," Lisa said, her voice a blend of tenderness and resolve. "We can forge our own path, even if it means challenging everything we've been told." Lena's eyes met Jordan's, and in his steady gaze, she found a silent promise, a commitment to uncover the deeper truths behind the supernatural bond and the Alpha's relentless claim. Together, they decided that the time for silent suffering was over. There was a palpable understanding among them. To truly reclaim their lives, they must confront the legacy of the pack head-on and expose the secrets that had long been buried in shadow. That night, as the embers of the confrontation smoldered in the background and the group huddled together in a circle of whispered plans and cautious optimism, Lena felt a stirring deep within her, a blend of defiance, fear, and a dangerous curiosity. The looming decision was clear. To break free from the oppressive ties that had bound her, she would need to dive deeper into the mysteries of the pack, to challenge the very nature of the supernatural bond that had marked her as a mate. As dawn crept over the horizon, casting a pale light on their determined faces, Lena's mind was awash with the promise of change. The conversation had left her with more questions than answers, yet it also ignited a spark of resolve. There was a path ahead, a precarious, uncharted road that promised both liberation and the risk of even greater entanglement. The secrets hidden in the shadows of the pack were waiting to be revealed, and with her new allies by her side, Lena knew that the time had come to make a choice that would alter everything. In that fragile moment of unity and vulnerability, the promise of deeper secrets and a looming decision hung in the air like a storm on the horizon. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Lena, with her defiant heart and unyielding spirit, was ready to step into the unknown and challenge the very foundations of her fate. The hidden truths. In the quiet aftermath of that explosive confrontation, the refuge fell into a heavy, anticipatory silence, a silence that felt pregnant with revelations waiting to be unearthed. As Lena sat in the corner of a dimly lit room with her new allies, her heart still pounding from the night's raw emotions, a slow, deliberate conversation began to unfold. It was during these hushed exchanges that the enigmatic terms alpha, Luna, and mate began to reveal their dark secrets. Lisa leaned forward, her eyes glistening with both empathy and an unspoken resolve. "Lena," she began, softly, "there's more to these words than you realize. They aren't just titles. They're the very fabric of our existence." Her voice, calm yet imbued with urgency, set the stage for a deep dive into the mysteries that had haunted Lena since the mark appeared. Jordan, his tone measured and reflective, added, "The Alpha is not merely a leader, but the embodiment of power, an ancient force that governs not only our pack but the destiny of every mate within it. His claim is absolute, and that mark on your skin is a testament to that bond. It's like a seal, a binding contract that ties you to something far beyond the ordinary." Lena listened, her mind racing as fragments of memories and hushed rumors from her past resurfaced. In her thoughts, the term alpha evolved from a vague concept into a force with a tangible, if terrifying, presence. It was the alpha's influence that had been etched onto her flesh, a mystical imprint that defined her fate, all without her consent. The realization sent a shiver down her spine, a mix of anger and dread that clashed with her burgeoning hope for liberation. Lisa continued, "And then there's Luna, a term used to describe the mate of an alpha, the counterpart who balances his power. But it's more than that. A Luna is seen as the heart of the pack, a guiding light that, if nurtured properly, can both calm the tempest of the alpha and offer a chance for change. Yet, for many, this bond becomes a curse, a life sentence that strips away choice." Her words struck Lena with the force of truth, each syllable deepening the mystery of her own mark and the destiny it promised. The conversation turned toward the concept of mate. Jordan's voice softened as he explained, "To be a mate is to be intertwined with someone's fate, to share a bond that is as profound as it is binding. It's not just an emotional connection. It's a supernatural tether that ensures neither party can truly walk away without suffering. That connection, while powerful, can also be a source of tremendous pain. It promises belonging, but at the cost of your autonomy." Lena's inner turmoil surged as these words reverberated within her. The mark, the alpha's claim, and the concept of mate now formed a triptych of fates, each layer intensifying her own sense of loss and confusion. In her mind, she revisited moments of fleeting freedom, now forever tainted by the inevitability of this supernatural bond. The emotional impact was overwhelming. Every revelation felt like a blow, a reminder that her life was no longer hers to command. Her thoughts churned with questions. How could a force so ancient, so imbued with power, dictate her destiny so ruthlessly? Was this bond a mere tool of control, or did it hold within it the potential for transformation? A dark alchemy that could one day be turned to her advantage. The emotional weight of these revelations was immense, leaving her both yearning for freedom and terrified of the cost that such liberation might demand. In the quiet that followed, the murmurs of their conversation settled into an almost palpable silence. Lena gazed at her own reflection in a cracked mirror hanging on the wall. The mark on her neck, once an abstract symbol of the unknown, now glowed faintly, a constant searing reminder of the fate that had been forcibly imposed upon her. It was as if the mark itself was alive, whispering dark promises of a future, entwined with both wonder and sorrow. A single lingering thought began to crystallize in her mind, slowly forming like the first fragile ice on a winter pond. Despite the terror, despite the pain, Lena felt a spark, a defiant determination that shone through the darkness of her despair. If these bonds, these secrets of the pack, were as immutable as they seemed, then perhaps understanding them could be the key to reclaiming her own destiny. Yet, with every new piece of truth, came the looming question that now haunted her thoughts. What will be the cost of these bonds? How much of herself must she sacrifice in order to be freed from the supernatural? Tether? The question echoed in the silence of the room, heavy and unyielding, a promise of both salvation and inevitable consequence. As the revelations slowly wove themselves into the fabric of her consciousness, Lena knew that her journey was only just beginning. The hidden truths had been laid bare, exposing a destiny that was as cruel as it was potent. And as the shadows in the room deepened, she resolved to forge a path forward, a path where she might one day redefine the very essence of what it meant to be marked by destiny. Crossroads of Destiny. Lena stood alone in a dimly lit chamber, the weight of her past and the searing burn of the mark on her neck converging into one single, overwhelming presence. In the silence, the pulse of her heart seemed to beat in, tandem with the distant echoes of a fate she could neither escape nor fully embrace. Her mind was a battlefield, torn between the burning desire to break free from this cursed destiny and the inescapable pull of the supernatural bond that had been forcefully etched into her very being. In that quiet, charged moment, Lena's thoughts swirled like leaves caught in a storm. She remembered the vibrant life she once knew, a life filled with the laughter of friends, the warmth of family, and dreams that soared high above the mundane. Yet now, those memories were tainted by the relentless claim of the Alpha, whose presence loomed over every thought. The mark was not merely a symbol of control. It had become a part of her, a bittersweet tether that both isolated and, in a twisted way, connected her to a power that was as alluring as it was oppressive. Her inner debate reached a fevered pitch. One part of her screamed for liberation, to shatter the chains that bound her, to reclaim the autonomy stolen from her so long ago. The thought of a life unburdened by this mark, a future where she could choose her own path, filled her with a fierce, unyielding longing. Every fiber of her being rebelled against the notion that her destiny was preordained, that her heart had been hijacked by a force she had never consented to. Yet, amid the torrent of defiance, another, more insidious emotion pulsed through her veins, a twisted, almost obsessive love for the very power that had marked her. It was as if the scar on her skin carried not only the sting of betrayal, but also a forbidden allure, a secret promise of strength and connection. In moments of solitude, Lena found herself inexplicably drawn to the mark, its dark lines a reminder of an ancient covenant that spoke of unity and eternal bonds. This duality, the collision of liberation and attachment, tormented her soul and rendered her unable to decide where her true loyalty lay. In the stillness of that crossroads, Lena's eyes filled with tears as she considered the steep sacrifices that might be demanded of her if she dared to break free. Would casting off the mark mean losing a part of herself that, no matter how painful, had become a vital piece of her identity? Could she truly survive the wrath of forces far more formidable than any earthly chain? The future stretched before her like a precarious tightrope, each step fraught with peril and the promise of either redemption or ruin. Images of a life without the mark danced in her mind, lively streets, genuine laughter, and moments of unbridled freedom. But those dreams were shadowed by the looming specter of the Alpha's influence, a reminder that every act of rebellion might invite a punishment as severe as the control she so despised. The internal crescendo built steadily, emotions crashing over her in waves: anger, despair, longing, and a grudging, painful acceptance of the role the mark played in her destiny. In that climactic moment, as the weight of her decision pressed down like the relentless pull of gravity, Lena's voice trembled with resolve. "I must choose," she whispered to herself, the words barely audible yet charged with monumental significance. It was a declaration born out of raw vulnerability, a recognition that her life, regardless of the pain and sacrifice, belonged to her alone. Every beat of her heart, every tear that escaped, was a testament to her determination to forge a new path. The world outside the chamber seemed to hold its breath as Lena's internal battle reached its zenith. The air around her was thick with anticipation, as if the very fabric of reality awaited the outcome of this fateful decision. In that suspended moment, the dual forces of desire and defiance, of control and freedom, warred within her. The question, that now loomed large, as piercing as the mark on her skin, was inevitable. What will be the cost of breaking these bonds? As the silence deepened and her decision crystallized in her mind, Lena stepped forward. The path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty and danger, a tightrope walk between a past that promised solace and a future that could offer liberation. With a final resolute breath, she made her choice, a choice that would either liberate her from the chains of a supernatural fate or plunge her deeper into a labyrinth of inescapable destiny. In that open-ended moment, as Lena's figure faded into the dim corridor, the echo of her determined steps left the audience to wonder, would this ultimate decision set her free? Or was it merely the prelude to an even darker, more inescapable fate? Fighting for her future, Lena's heart hammered as she stepped out of the sanctuary of dim corridors and into the raging chaos of the confrontation that would decide her fate. The weight of the mark on her neck pulsed with every beat, a reminder of the supernatural bond that had ruled her life for too long. Now, fueled by a fierce determination to reclaim her destiny, she had reached the tipping point, a moment where her inner resolve clashed head-on with the forces that sought to keep her in bondage. In the flickering light of a narrow passage, Lena found herself face to face with a group of the Alpha's minions, shadowy figures whose cold eyes and grim expressions betrayed the remorseless loyalty they had been forced to bear. Their presence was ominous, a tangible force of the Alpha's dominion, yet Lena refused to shrink back. Her voice, though trembling with both anger and sorrow, cut through the oppressive silence. "I will no longer be your prisoner." The air was thick with tension as one of the minions stepped forward, his tone icy and commanding. "You do not understand what you're defying," he spat, his words laced with an authority that had once seemed invincible. But Lena's inner fire burned brighter than the fear that threatened to consume her. With every step she took, her emotions cascaded: raw anger at the chains that had bound her, sorrow for the life she had lost, and an unwavering defiance that resonated in every fiber of her being. In that moment, the corridor became a battleground. The clatter of shifting bodies, the echo of aggressive shouts, and the frantic rustling of clothing blended into a cacophony that was both terrifying and liberating. Lena's movements were a blur, a desperate dance of survival. She struck out, not just with her physical strength, but with the full force of her soul. Every punch, every kick, was imbued with the pain of years spent in subjugation and the bittersweet taste of hope for a future reclaimed. Amid the melee, Lena's mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Her anger surged like wildfire, igniting every cell with the need to shatter the bonds that had held her captive. Yet beneath that fierce blaze lay a deep-seated sorrow, a mourning for the life that had been stolen from her, the dreams that had been erased by the mark. Each blow she landed was both a release of pent-up fury and a poignant lament for the past. The raw emotion of the battle was a testament to her inner turmoil, a turbulent mix of grief and an indomitable spirit that refused to be broken. The Alpha's presence, although not physically in the fray, was a looming specter that cast long shadows over the conflict. Every whisper of his name, every mention of his claim, served as a chilling reminder of the supernatural force that sought to dictate her every move. As the skirmish escalated, one of the minions managed to corner her against a cold, unyielding wall. For a heartbeat, Lena's eyes locked onto his, and she saw in them a reflection of the darkness she fought against, a mirror of the oppressive destiny that had marked her. In that precarious moment, as she fought to free herself from his grasp, Lena's inner voice roared with defiance. "I choose my own future," she declared, her voice echoing off the stone walls with a power that belied her exhaustion. The words were a promise to herself and a challenge to the forces that had sought to keep her tethered to a life she never wanted. With a surge of adrenaline, she twisted out of his grip, her movements fueled by the desperate hope of liberation. Yet, even as she pushed forward, the battle raged on around her. The Alpha's minions regrouped, their attacks more coordinated and desperate than before. The corridor filled with a frenzy of motion, shouts, the sound of fists colliding with flesh, and the distant echo of a relentless, unyielding force. Each second was charged with a volatile mix of fear and possibility. The bitter taste of potential freedom mingled with the acrid sting of pain, leaving her with the raw, palpable understanding that every victory came at a steep cost. Through the chaos, a moment of clarity pierced the tumult. Lena, bloodied but unbowed, paused to catch her breath. Her eyes, fierce and resolute, scanned the tumultuous scene as if searching for an answer in the swirling maelstrom of conflict. In that brief interlude, the questions that had tormented her for so long surged forward once more. Could she truly break free from these chains? Would the price of liberation be worth the scars, both seen and unseen, that she would carry with her? The corridor's din began to subside into a tense silence as the last of the minions retreated, leaving Lena standing amid the wreckage of the skirmish. Her body throbbed with pain, each bruise and wound a testament to the fierce battle fought. Yet her spirit soared even as her heart remained heavy with uncertainty. The Alpha's presence was still a looming, unseen threat, and the mark on her neck pulsed as an unyielding reminder of the bond that had so ruthlessly claimed her. As she wiped the blood from a cut on her brow, Lena's eyes glinted with a defiant promise, a vow to fight for her future no matter how steep the cost. The battle had left her battered, but it had also awakened a fierce determination. In that fleeting cliffhanger moment, as the echoes of the confrontation faded into the shadowed corridor, Lena wondered, would the next moment finally bring her the freedom she so desperately craved? Or was her fate destined to spiral further into the darkness? The answer, suspended in the charged air, remained as uncertain as the future itself. A new dawn approaches. In the aftermath of the brutal confrontation, Lena stood in a shattered corridor, her body aching from every blow and her spirit heavy with a mix of grief and relief. The echoes of violence had finally subsided, leaving behind a silence that was as piercing as it was unexpected. Around her, the remnants of the skirmish were scattered, a testament to the fierce struggle she had just endured. Bruises blossomed across her skin, and deep cuts told silent stories of her defiance. Yet, amid the chaos, there was an undeniable stillness, a fragile pause that hinted at the possibility of renewal. Lena's eyes, still stinging with tears, took in the scene around her. The once ominous corridors now bore the scars of conflict. Splintered wood, dented metal, and scattered remnants of what used to be the Alpha's oppressive grip. Every mark on the wall, every bruise on her body, was a visible record of the price she had paid for a taste of freedom. Yet, as she gazed at these physical wounds, another, deeper pain pulsed within her, a sorrow for the life that had been. so violently upended, and for the innocence that had been lost in the process. In a small, forgotten corner of the refuge, Lena found a moment of solitude. The relentless sounds of battle had given way to a hushed calm, and in that quiet, her racing thoughts began to settle. She sank down onto a cold, concrete bench, the cool surface offering a stark contrast to the burning ache in her limbs. Slowly, she unwrapped a strip of cloth from a wound on her arm, watching as the raw, red flesh revealed the harsh reality of her ordeal. Each scar, whether new or old, was etched with memories of defiance, despair, and the twisted bond that had marked her forever. Yet, even amid the physical pain and the raw anguish, Lena detected a subtle undercurrent of hope. A small, almost imperceptible glimmer of light, like the first rays of dawn piercing through a stormy sky, began to stir within her. It was in the gentle rustle of the wind outside, the distant chirping of early birds, and the quiet murmur of supportive voices that still lingered in the refuge. In those fleeting moments, she allowed herself to imagine a future beyond the oppressive shadow of the Alpha, a future where the scars did not define her, but rather told the story of a battle fought and survived. Her thoughts drifted to the new alliances she had forged with Lisa, Jordan, and others who had risked everything to stand by her side. Their words of encouragement and shared sorrow had planted seeds of resilience in her heart. "Even in darkness there is a way out," Lisa had whispered, her tone both tender and resolute. Lena recalled that promise as if it were a lifeline, a secret refrain that echoed through her weary mind. Each kind word from her newfound allies was a small victory, a moment of solace in a landscape scarred by pain and control. In the quiet solitude of that early morning, Lena's inner reflections grew deeper. The relentless battle with the Alphas, minions had not just left physical marks, but had reshaped her very soul. She felt the heavy burden of destiny pressing on her, the mark on her neck a constant reminder of a fate she had never chosen. Yet, as she closed her eyes and breathed in the cool, fresh air that seeped through a partially open window, a tentative resolve began to take form. She realized that while the wounds might never fully fade, they could also serve as a roadmap, a guide to understanding the strength hidden within her pain. The scars were not just symbols of loss. They were also emblems of survival and transformation. Each bruise, each cut, was a silent testimony to her defiance, a reminder that she had fought, and still fought, for her freedom. Lena's mind wandered to the possibilities that lay ahead. Could these very scars become the foundation for a new beginning? Was it possible that the path to liberation was hidden within the very trials that had once seemed insurmountable? With these questions echoing in her heart, Lena slowly rose from the bench. She allowed herself a moment of introspection, a silent vow to search for a way to transform her pain into power, to reclaim the fragments of a life that had been shattered by the cruel grip of destiny. The journey ahead was uncertain, and the weight of the mark would always serve as a reminder of what she had endured. Yet, in that moment of quiet determination, she made a promise to herself. She would not let the darkness define her. As the first light of dawn broke through the gloom, casting soft shadows on the battered walls of the refuge, Lena took one final, steadying breath. The echoes of the past lingered, and the promise of the future shimmered faintly on the horizon. Though the cost of liberation was unknown, and the scars, both visible and hidden, would forever remind her of her struggle, Lena felt an unyielding spark of hope. With that fragile hope lighting her path, she stepped forward into the new day, her resolve firm, but her heart still heavy with questions. What would be the true cost of these bonds? And could she ever find a way to transform her fate into something truly her own? The answers, shrouded in the soft glow of dawn, remained tantalizingly out of reach as she began her journey into the uncertain light of a new beginning. A fate, yet to be sealed. As the echoes of Lena's tumultuous journey slowly faded into the background, the twilight of her past merged with the uncertain promise of the future. Standing at the edge of a quiet dawn, Lena revisited the moments that had defined her transformation, from a frightened captive bound by a supernatural mark to a fierce individual determined to reclaim her destiny. Each memory, from the reckless road trips through the rugged Texas countryside to the heart-wrenching confrontations with the Alpha's minions, had carved out the contours of her soul, etching deep scars that bore testament to both her pain and her resilience. In those early, fragile hours of morning, Lena allowed herself a moment of stillness, a brief respite to reflect on how far she had come. The mark on her neck, once a symbol of oppressive control, now pulsed with an almost defiant glow, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, she had discovered her true worth. The memories of Manchester, vivid snapshots of laughter, love, and the freedom to dream, served as a stark contrast to the confines of the ranch and the relentless grip of fate. They were not just recollections of a lost past, but the blueprint of a future she was determined to build on her own terms. Her journey had been a mosaic of conflicting emotions. There were moments of bitter betrayal and overwhelming sorrow, where the weight of the mark seemed unbearable. And yet, interspersed with the pain, were sparks of defiance and quiet triumph. Each confrontation, each act of rebellion against the supernatural bonds that had marked her as a mate, had chipped away at the chains of destiny. With every step taken in the corridors of the refuge, Lena had not only fought for her freedom, but had also begun to understand the intricate, often paradoxical nature of the Pack's code, a system that both protected and controlled its members. Now, as she stood on the precipice of a new day, Lena could sense the larger world of the Pack stirring beyond the immediate confines of her struggle. The whispers of her allies, voices like those of Lisa, Jordan, and Marcus, reminded her that she was part of something greater, a network of souls bound together by shared pain and secret hopes. These alliances had offered her moments of unexpected warmth amid the cold rigidity of enforced destiny, hinting at the possibility that even the most oppressive bonds might be reimagined into something that nurtured rather than constrained. In the quiet, introspective hours of the early morning, Lena's mind raced with the many revelations that had reshaped her understanding of the supernatural forces at play. The concepts of alpha, Luna, and mate had once seemed like cryptic labels assigned without thought, but now they unfolded as complex elements of an ancient covenant, one that demanded sacrifice, yet also held the potential for transformation. The truth was a double-edged sword. It had given her the power to see through the illusions of control, yet it also weighed heavily on her spirit, with the promise of an inevitable cost. A soft breeze drifted through the slightly open window, carrying with it the distant hum of life beyond the refuge, a subtle reminder that the world outside still pulsed with possibility. Lena closed her eyes and inhaled deeply, feeling the cool air fill her lungs. In that moment of solitary reflection, she vowed that her future would no longer be dictated by the invisible chains of fate. Instead, she would forge a path of her own making, guided by the strength and wisdom gleaned from every hardship and every tender victory. Yet, as the first rays of sunlight crept through the darkness, Lena could not shake the lingering uncertainty that clung to her like a shadow. The promise of liberation was tantalizingly close, but she knew that every step toward freedom carried its own peril. The Pack, with all its mystique and ancient codes, loomed large on the horizon of her destiny, a realm where alliances could shift in an instant, and the price of belonging might be higher than she could ever imagine. Standing there, on the cusp of a new beginning, Lena allowed herself a bittersweet smile, a small, defiant gesture in the face of an uncertain future. The scars on her body and the marks on her soul were reminders of the cost of her past, but also symbols of the resilience that had carried her through the darkest nights. She could sense that her journey was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. As she stepped forward into the brightening day, a final thought echoed in her mind, stirring both dread and hope. What will be the cost of these bonds, And can one ever truly break free from a fate that has been sealed in destiny? With that lingering question, Lena disappeared into the radiant glow of dawn. A fate yet to be sealed, a future yet unwritten, leaving the world to wonder what epic chapter would follow in her relentless quest for freedom.